So thank you everyone for joining today's webcast. My name is Stephanie Long from InCycle, and I will be the moderator. And this webcast will be recorded for your future reference. So I will also be sending out after this webcast an email with the download to the presentation and also the recording. And so throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to type them in the chat box, and our consultants will do the best to respond either throughout this webcast or at the time reserved for the Q&A session at the end. However, any questions we don't get to during this webcast, they will be answered in a follow-up email. Now, let's get started by giving you a little InCycle software introduction. So we've been around since 2002. We are both a Gold ALM and Azure partner. We are focused on 4 key service areas, such as Visual Studio ALM and TFS, Agile Adoption and Enterprise Transformations, DevOps Process and Practices, and finally, we provide services around Microsoft Azure. So in essence, we really cover the full ALM, DevOps, and Azure-related spectrum. We also have consultants across Canada and the US, so there is most likely someone in your area. Now, before we get started on today's webcast, I would like to introduce you to our 2 presenters. Our first one is Dave Burnison, who is a senior ALM consultant with us. He supports customers by providing guidance and best practices for ALM. Dave is very passionate about ALM and the software development lifecycle. He has worked in the software development industry his entire career. And our next presenter is David Pitcher. He is one of our senior consultants and a lead technical consultant on Visual Studio, TFS, and Azure. Prior to InCycle, David was at Microsoft for 15 years, and he's a distinguished ALM Ranger. So without further ado, I would like to turn this over to Dave and David.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. It's a pleasure to be talking with you this afternoon. I'll start out by going over the agenda here. First, we're going to talk about just a few brief highlights about what's new in TFS 2015, and really the thing we kind of want to focus on there is why should you upgrade? What are some of the compelling new features that you want to take into consideration? We'll review some of the common upgrade scenarios, and most importantly, we've had a few questions come to us about the process of upgrading to 2015, and we're going to go through those questions and answer those questions, and we can take other questions as well. So let's dive right in. What's new in TFS 2015? I'm going to highlight just a few things across the various hubs for TFS from the Team Web Access. We'll start out looking at the Home hub. The big new thing there is the dashboards that are now available on the home page for every team. And this isn't just for every team project, this is for every team within your team project. Each team can customize their own dashboard. You can have multiple dashboards for each team. So for example, you could have an overview dashboard that has the metrics and things that you want to keep a close eye on for overall for your project. You can create links to other things that may be related to your project but not directly part of TFS. You could create other dashboards. So if you want to have a quality dashboard, or if you want to have a build dashboard, you can set those up as separate dashboards for your team. There's lots of new widgets. As you may recall from TFS 2013, we could track source code check-ins, or we could track query results, but now you can actually display those results right on the dashboard. You can create a markdown widget, which is just an easy way to create some HTML to display on your dashboard. So whether that's kind of an overview of what your project is all about, or like I mentioned earlier, links out to other tools or other systems that you may be using in conjunction with TFS, or maybe it's even links out to your production system or whatever that may be. But there's lots of options here with these dashboard widgets, and each widget can be configured itself. For example, with this query results widget, I can configure it to turn red anytime I have more than 0 block tasks, or I can have it turn green when that number is 0. Lots of different configuration options there. And just like you could pin your work item charts to your home page in 2013, you can pin your work item charts to your dashboard. So you could have a different set of a different set of charts on your quality dashboard versus your overview dashboard, or whatever you would like. Moving on to the Code Hub, the biggest thing here in TFS 2015, you know now that TFS has been supporting Git for a while, but now you can have Git and Team Foundation version control repositories in the same team project. So within any one team project, you can have a single TFVC repository and as many Git repositories as you would like. Another nice new feature is the ability to do some quick code editing right on the web client or on Team Web Access. Whenever you make changes to a file here and save it, it automatically checks it in as a single file change set. You can do some things like changing all occurrences of a particular function name or whatever. This comes in real handy when it comes to editing things like your welcome page or other markdown pages that you may create. You can edit those and preview those right in this code editor that's now part of Team Web Access. You can now view history on a folder. So at the folder level, you can get all the details for a particular folder within your source code repository. Moving on to work, this is where we see a lot of really nice, compelling features and reasons to upgrade. When we look at the backlogs, it's a lot easier to navigate the backlogs now. Whenever you're looking at a user story, you can easily expand that to see all of the tasks right on the user story page. You don't have to expand them all at once. You can expand and collapse each user story individually. There's a new text filtering option. We had the option to filter based on tags, but now there's a text filter. So whatever you type in this box will filter it down to the work items that have that text appearing in any of the columns that appear here on the backlog. So if you've got a real large backlog, or if you've got it fully expanded to where you're looking at all the details and you need to hone in and find just the one or two user stories of interest, you can use that filtering to do that real easily. Multi-select capability now on the backlog. So here we're showing different bugs, and from here we can easily drag and drop multi-selected items to add them to an iteration, or we can reparent them so that we could make these bugs children of a particular user story or something. Another nice thing is you can do a bulk edit. So if I wanted to take those 3 bugs right there that are selected, and I wanted to say the severity on all those bugs was critical, I could do that in one edit action rather than having to edit each bug individually. I can easily move items to the top or to a specific position. This is helpful, again, if you've got a really large or really long backlog, because that can make it real difficult to drag things up and down a really long list. I can do a bulk assign to. So if I wanted to take and assign each of these bugs to David Pitcher to fix, I could do that in one fell swoop. Dragging items to assign them to an iteration, or dragging items to the mapping pane. So if I had a number of user stories selected here and I wanted to make them children of a particular feature, I could easily do that from here as well. Another nice feature with the drag and drop now in the backlog is being able to reparent items. You can do that from multi-select, or you can do it single select. So in this case, we're taking the check service status user story and changing its parent from customer phone phase 1 to customer service. And also with 2015, they added out of the box the epic level portfolio backlog, but you can create other levels of backlogs. So if you wanted to take this up to sagas and themes, you could do that. But no matter how many levels of portfolio backlogs you have, you can specify for your team, or at the team level, which of those levels of portfolio backlog apply to your team. So it'll cut down on the clutter that you would see in your backlog if your team is not using all those levels of backlog, portfolio backlogs. There's some really nice updates to the Kanban and task boards. One thing that's really going to help using the board is the ability to apply styles to cards so that you can customize cards. For example, here I said turn a card yellow if the priority is 1, or turn a card red if it has a tag that contains the text blocked in it. So when you're in your status meetings and you're using the Kanban board or the task board, those things are really going to jump out at you, really going to pop out at you, especially if there's a lot of information on the screen already. And this is all easily customizable right from within Team Web Access. When you bring up the settings, there's a way here to add different styles and specify the card color or the title style, and then specify the criteria that you want applied to that style. From the Kanban board itself now, we can reorder user stories and bugs. We can change the priority order there. We can create a definition of done for many of the columns on the Kanban board so that you can make it very clear to your team what does it mean for a user story to go from in progress to resolved or closed. Such as having unit tests tested by someone other than the original developer, upgrade scripts written and tested. Because we all know just saying that it compiles and works on my machine doesn't mean that it's done. We have to make it very clear to each and everybody on the team what it means to be done. Now you can also do a lot more right from the Kanban board because you can see the tasks as a checklist, so we can expand or collapse these little checklists here, and from here I can reorder, I can reprioritize the tasks, I can say which tasks are done, I can add new tasks. Another thing we can do now is easily configure for each team how we want bugs to appear in relationship to our requirements or tasks. Do we want them to appear on the backlog? Do we want them to appear on the task board? Or do we want them to not appear at all and we're just going to manage them through other queries and other means? But it gives you, that option to manage those how your team manages and not shoehorn you into any one particular approach. Another miscellaneous update under work, there's now a query iteration or a current iteration query token that you can use. So for all those queries that you have for your current iteration, you no longer have to go to those queries on the first day of every iteration and change the iteration path to whatever it is. You can plug in that current iteration token and it just automatically updates, just similar to how the @today token automatically updates for you. Now that there's data actually related to the Kanban board, which board column is it in, if you're using the feature to split columns between doing and done, if you're using the feature for swim lanes, that data you can include in a work item query as well. Another new exciting feature about TFS 2015 is the new build system. This is the next generation of team build. One of the key things is it provides cross-platform capabilities. So whether you're building for Visual Studio on Windows, Android, or iOS, you've got build tasks in here out of the box for a lot of different build-related tasks. and now you can get more from your build process too, whether continuous integration to find builds earlier. You can set up the same build to be both a continuous integration build, and you can schedule it to run at noon and at midnight or whatever. You can mix and match the continuous integration and the scheduled builds together for one thing. Another thing, once you build up a particular build that has all the steps that you and your team need as kind of a template for other builds, you can save that off as a template, and then when you go to create new builds, that'll be available to select as a template. You don't have to build up all your tasks and your sequence from scratch. One of the nice things about this is being able to customize the build process. No longer do you have to go in and edit Windows workflow just to insert another step along the way in the build process. You can add a build step, and we saw examples on that previous screen of different types of build steps. There's also build steps for calling things like PowerShell scripts or just running something from the command line. You can easily add those in here and put them wherever you want within the sequence. When it comes to calling scripts, you can call virtually any kind of a PowerShell script or other script, pass arguments to that script. There's lots of predefined variables that will be available in the context of running that script. There's also a variables tab here where you can create your own variables. So if there's something that somebody needs to specify at the time the build is queued, you can have a default value in there, and then they can override it when they queue a build. A lot of times you're going to store these scripts right in source control. When we make these slides available to everybody, there'll be a link here. You can see a sample customization that uses a PowerShell script. One thing to note in testing is now you have the ability for a test suite. You can actually invite multiple testers to run through that suite. So if you've got multiple people, your product owner and some other stakeholders that are involved in acceptance testing for a user story, you can send out an email to them, and they'll see the test cases that are available for that test, and then they can also run through the test cases. One thing I should mention here is the licensing for Visual Studio and TFS has been updated such that you don't have to have one of those more advanced licenses to execute test cases. Now, you can execute test cases with just the basic license, and that really helps in these situations where you need to do acceptance testing like that. Okay, so that's a whirlwind tour of some key new features. Now let's talk about some of the common upgrade scenarios. First is in-place upgrade. Now, this is where you're going to use your existing hardware, your existing version of SQL Server, etc. You're really not going to change anything. You're just going to install TFS 2015 on top of the version that you already have, whether it's 2012 or 2013, etc. Then there's the migration-based upgrade. Now, this is where you're going to use new servers and new software. Something to think about if you're considering a migration-based upgrade, think about actually using Azure Virtual Machines as your servers for TFS. Now, the key thing you're going to do here is you're going to copy the databases, backup, copy the databases over from your old environment, restore them into your new environment, and then perform the upgrade there. Another consideration is actually to not to do an upgrade per se, but to migrate from your on-premises TFS to Visual Studio Team System. And like I say, this is not technically an upgrade, but this is migrating the needed data from your local environment to Visual Studio Team Services. So just a couple of notes on these different forms of upgrade. This is using your current hardware, or assuming that your current hardware and software meet all the TFS 2015 requirements, like your operating system versions and your version of SQL Server, etc. This is applicable if you don't want to change your TFS topology. If you're currently running both your application tier and your data tier on a single server and you want to continue doing that, then this is a valid way to go. But even if you are doing an in-place upgrade, it's still advisable to perform a test upgrade on a clone of this environment. Microsoft's done a great job of making the upgrades easier, more smoother, make sure they account for more and more situations and customizations that you may have, but you still want to perform that test upgrade just to make sure you don't run into any issues. And if you do, you know what those issues are, and you can have resolutions prepared for those issues when it is time to perform your actual production upgrade. Migration-based upgrades. You're going to consider this if you want to upgrade your server operating system, or if you want to upgrade SQL Server, if you need to upgrade your hardware, or you anticipate greater usage after the upgrade, therefore you want to run on bigger hardware, so to speak. Maybe you're going to be using new TFS features, or there's features that you're not currently taking advantage of, like the testing. Now that more people can utilize testing, maybe that's something you want to add into your environment, and therefore that leads to more users, and maybe you want to scale up your system. So those are considerations for the migration-based upgrade. So let's take a quick look at some of the upgrade paths. If you're currently on TFS 2010 SP1, 2012, or 2013, you can upgrade directly to TFS 2015. However, if you're on TFS 2008 or 2010, you're going to have to first upgrade to TFS 2012 and then upgrade directly to TFS 2015. So that being said, that's a quick run through of the common upgrade scenarios. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the questions that we've received. David, we had a number of people ask us about, what are some of the gotchas for upgrading to 2015? So can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. Thank you, Dave. I can absolutely address these. Not a problem. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. So a short answer for this is the upgrade should go smooth for the most part. Right? Microsoft really has done, I think, a fantastic job with improving the overall upgrade experience and making it really a non-event. The biggest gotcha in general would be making sure that you plan the necessary time to accommodate your upgrade. So how much of an outage window do you want to make available for everyone while that upgrade process does happen? And that's where Dave talked about making sure you follow those upgrade paths and doing a dry run or a demo run to make sure that you can follow the process and everything has been set up. Begin with, to help mitigate any gotchas that come up, I would say recommending following best practices. So there's a lot of things that you should do in terms of prep work for the upgrade. One of them is identifying all your service accounts and machines where you have configuration, making sure those are all working, the passwords are active. So a typical install, you want to use a dedicated installation account and deactivate that account so no one can tamper with the install. But now you got to do the upgrade. You should go back in and validate that, one, the password hasn't expired. And then you'll discover those issues on your dry runs. The second item that you'd really want to follow is your environment patching. Making sure that your environment is up to all the prerequisites for TFS 2015. So along with these answers to these questions and whatnot, there are links to this. So you can go to the MSDN documentation, and they do a very detailed listing of SQL Server versions, OS versions, SharePoint versions, Visual Studio versions, and all the compatibility that you need for your environment for TFS 2015. So go through, double check, and validate all that. Then also, when you do your dry runs, make sure those are done. And that's why, in this case where Dave mentioned Azure, it's very easy to go and provision those environments quickly and do that deployment and upgrade to make sure you've got everything in place. The third key item for gotchas in terms of the upgrade, which I think is going to be for large enterprises or those that have a very large TFS installation or footprint on an instance. And this is looking at where I say database sizes that are 1 terabyte or greater. And there could be many reasons for that large database. It could be a large volume of source control, or a large volume of work items, or a combination of source control and builds and test data. So if you do have these large environments, it is recommended that you execute the TFS pre-upgrade tool. And this will actually work on your production environment. And while that is still live, keep and start doing the schema changes to the TFS backend database and prepping that environment for the upgrade. So the upgrade time is much smaller and you're not taking your system down. However, there are impacts to doing this. So Microsoft has done a tremendous job, again, of limiting the impact to the operational characteristics and a daily performance, but it still will have some impact. It will slow down. In order to use the pre-upgrade tool, you must be running SQL Server Enterprise. So if your TFS database installation is standard SQL Server, you cannot use the pre-upgrade tool. The other thing that you should do before running the full execution of the pre-upgrade tool is, again, doing some planning. Because we're doing a live upgrade, it's taking your existing database and basically almost creating a copy of it to upgrade all the data and the schema in the database. So there's a nice little switch on the upgrade tool called the estimate switch. And then you can point it to your existing TFS instance, and with the estimate switch turned on, it'll calculate the total disk size needed to run the pre-upgrade tool. And it will look at your current TFS database size, all the tables, and look at how much space is already allocated to SQL and how much additional space you'll need. So you'll have a total of drive space. So you may want to, again, if you run this, all right, I need to add extra disk space or capacity to run the pre-upgrade tool. So that's really the big one, is on the large databases, to get performance out of it and not have a long downtime. Is, again, if you're on SQL Server Enterprise and you have a database that's larger than 1 terabyte, it is recommended to run the pre-upgrade. And depending along the size, it could take 2 to 3 days to a couple weeks of running. But again, your production environment is still up and working. You're not taking the system down. And it will keep all the new changes once you kick off the upgrade, pre-upgrade, and sync everything. So you can keep checking in source control, making branches. You can keep adding work items and continue on your normal daily operational procedures. And once the pre-upgrade finishes, then you can do the final upgrade. The fourth item that you really need to be aware of with 2015 is the changes they've made to the process templates. So if you've customized your process template and you've customized it and derived it from the original Agile, Scrum, or CMMI templates, you have to be careful when you do your updates or make modifications, because Microsoft changed the way that the default out-of-the-box templates work in terms of being able to customize them. They are now what they call locked, and you can no longer modify the out-of-the-box templates. You can copy them, make changes, and republish. But when you republish, you have to remove the GUID out of the template and rename the template and change the version names. So there's a good MSDN article about that, describing that and what those changes were. This change, though, is for the better. This is going to allow more of the idea on VSTS for template customization and modifications. And so they need to start implementing those behaviors or those practices to enable that. So keep that in mind, again, if you do have custom process templates that were derived from the originals. All right, and the fifth and final thing to consider when doing an upgrade is with 2015, TFS 2015, there is no longer a standalone TFS Team Explorer install. Why does that impact you? Well, this is how you create new TFS team projects. You have to create team projects from Team Explorer. It's not enabled on the web portal. So your admins or the folks that are responsible for creating team projects will have to install some version of Visual Studio in order to do that. So again, there's no standalone TFS Team Explorer install. It's recommended, those that really don't use or license for Visual Studio, is to just download and install the Community Edition, and that will have Team Explorer installed for you. So that's all I have in terms of gotchas. And I think if they're listed in priority, the last two are the ones that will sneak up on you the most. The third one is running the TFS pre-upgrade tool without running the estimate first, and actually halfway through that pre-upgrade running out of disk space. So it's definitely important to run, if you're going to use that pre-upgrade tool, make sure you run it with the estimate option so you know how much disk space it will take.
Just on the process template customization, we've had a couple of questions come in on the chat. The one question I'll defer to later, but one is relative to the custom process template. So if we added a new work item state of ready, will that fail the install? The best practice around managing your custom process templates, or best practice that I've done in working with customers so far is, and I was going to mention this anyway, you really want to try and set up a cloned environment where you can run through your upgrade ahead of time. When it comes to process template customizations and work item customizations, if you look at this documentation, Microsoft lays out all the details of the changes that they've made to the process templates, so you can compare your work items to the changes that they have made and kind of merge the two together ahead of time, so that once the core upgrade itself is done, you can either go through what they call the Configure New Features wizard, or if the Configure New Features wizard is not able to combine your customizations with the updates, then you can take the work item files, the XML files that you've updated, and re-upload those. So yeah, you may have to take Microsoft's changes and apply those to the work item where you had added the ready state, and then re-upload that after the upgrade. But yeah, they provide lots of information about how to do that.
Okay. And I just want to clarify too, in this scenario, if you've modified the template, the upgrade will work just fine. You will not be able to re-upload your process template. So say if you had the original Agile template and you made that ready state change, so you've customized it and re-uploaded it, the upgrade performs and runs just fine. But say, and like what Dave's just discussed, I need to go and, since I've changed it, the new features weren't activated, so I have to modify or fix that template that I had in place. And if I try to re-upload it to the server, and it's the standard modification of the Agile, so it's got the old GUID in it and the Agile process template name in it, it will not allow you to upload. You'll have to delete the name or change the name and delete the GUID. So you can, again, just for clarity's sake, upgrade with custom templates. But you will not be able to edit the out-of-the-box templates and upload them with the same name. You'll have to rename them, and the biggest gotcha in there is the GUID and the template ID.
Right. But I think in where you've already applied customizations to specific team projects, after the upgrade, when you go into the admin pages for that particular team project, if there's still some work to be done, you'll have a link there that says, do you want to configure new features? When you click on that link, if your customizations can be merged together with the new customizations, TFS will take care of that for you. If you've made more complex customizations, added new work item types, or changed the workflow significantly from what it was originally, then TFS may not be able to do all that work on the fly, and you may need to edit the XML yourself for that particular work item type and re-upload it. But okay, so moving on to our next area, our next set of questions, keeping Visual Studio and TFS in sync.
Okay. Got a lot of questions around this one, or variations of this. And the short answer is no. Visual Studio and Team Foundation versions do not need to be kept in sync. In fact, you can have an old version of Visual Studio working with any version of TFS, or switch that around. Any version of TFS working with Visual Studio. So I could enable myself to work with very ancient Visual Studio 2005 if I wanted to, and work with a TFS backend. Now, depending on the older version of Visual Studio up to 2013, I would need to install an additional support for source control. So for 2005 and 2008, I would need the source control provider to install on Visual Studio so I can make use of TFS source control. If I am using Visual Studio 2010, I would need to install the compatibility GDR for Visual Studio so I can talk to TFS and get Team Explorer installed and work with it. So from a developer perspective, if I have projects that are using the old Visual Studio formats and I haven't upgraded those projects for development yet, I still can leverage all the features of TFS. Now, within Team Explorer, there are some features that you will not be able to take advantage of if you have the older version of Visual Studio. So the big one here is, say, if I'm using Visual Studio 2013, how do I go and trigger vNext builds or 2015 builds or access build definitions? In this scenario, you cannot do that directly from the IDE. So it's a new 2015 feature, so you can't access it from 2013. You can access all the feature sets and maybe even some newer stuff in 2015 with the older version of Visual Studio. But if you need to go do that, it's easy enough just to go out to the Team Explorer web edition, right? Just go to the Visual Studio TFS web portal, create your builds there, monitor builds, and trigger them, or use the new features from the web portal instead of the Visual Studio Team Explorer IDE integration. So
and in fact, for the new build, when you go to create a new build definition with the vNext builds, it's going to take you right to the web anyway. So pretty much most all of the features around the new build system are web-based anyway. So.
A quick question on the build. This is real quick. There is no tool built in, but TFS has got a full API for it, so you can build your own tool to programmatically create build definitions, queue builds, manage builds. So there's nothing that I know of out of the box yet that is not built into the IDE or the web portal. It's easy enough, though, again, to go and get the REST APIs and build your own utilities if you desire to.
And also, just to comment on that question, is there a tool to create VNext build definitions programmatically? The other thing there is if it's just that you need to create multiple definitions that are very similar but not exactly the same, that's where you can take a build definition that you've already created, save that as a template. And then when you go to create new build definitions, it'll already have all the tasks in there that you specified in that first build definition. Then you can just tweak some of the parameters or settings as needed for that next build. So it kind of depends on exactly what was driving that question.
So to continue on, the other compatibility piece, here's our touch on Visual Studio. The third big one is build controller and build agent compatibility. So if you upgrade to TFS 2015, it does not require you to upgrade your build agents and controllers. So 2015 is backwards compatible all the way down to TFS 2010 XAML-based build infrastructure. So there should be no concerns from gotchas or any other functionality capabilities that you'll be missing, or changes that you have to do to upgrade your build ecosystem. So upgrading TFS 2015 does not have any impact to it. You can even install the new 2015 build agent on an existing XAML-based agent. Those two can coexist on the same machine.
Exactly, yeah, that's a very important point, because I know one of the clients I was recently working with, their build agents, the machines they're running the builds on, have evolved in such a way over time that they actually have a hard time reproducing that exact machine, because it's difficult to identify all the little dependencies and everything that have been added on over time to that system. So rather than setting up a brand new build server just because they want a new agent, you can install that new VNext build agent side by side with the classic controller and or agent, and run both types of builds from the same machine. Just to kind of round out that question, or one of the first questions that came in from Marcus, I think we addressed the no need to install new TFS on the build servers. He also asked, what are agent pools? And just to touch on that briefly, the agent pools and agent queues, we don't. It's not within the scope of this webinar to get into all the details about that, but queues and pools are a way to set up and share agents now, even across team project collections. In the past, you had to have at least one. You had to have at least one collection per, or one controller per collection, but now with pools you can share the same agent across multiple collections. So, okay.
Then finally, supported build environments. They really need to be I'd say configured to the target software that you're building. So with the TFS version, it really doesn't matter about your build environments. It's all about managing the version of Visual Studio that you need, the version of MS Build, and other dependencies. So with that upgrade with TFS 2015, there is really no concern or impact to your build ecosystem.
Okay, moving along to our next question. I think we addressed part of this already about Team Explorer, but another aspect of that is Team Explorer also used to give you the Office integration so that you could look at work item queries inside of Excel, or you could use the PowerPoint storyboard features. How am I going to get that now, David, if I don't have a Team Explorer install?
Well, without Team Explorer install, if you do need Team Explorer, like we already touched on briefly, is you must install a version of Visual Studio. And Team Explorer is now native to Visual Studio, and it comes with all additions. So if you are a licensed user of Visual Studio, you'll have Team Explorer already there. So that covers the Pro Edition all the way up through Enterprise. If you do not have a license for Visual Studio, you can always install the free Community Edition, and that will have your Team Explorer add-in for you. So like we talked about before, if you do need to use certain aspects of Team Explorer to manage your TFS instance, such as creating projects, you can use the Community Edition to do that. There's no longer a separate individual install. If you're looking at multi-platform support, you still have Team Explorer add-in for Eclipse, so that's available. The other piece that usually got installed with the standalone TFS Explorer add-in was the Office, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. integration tools. So Microsoft has pulled that out and now have made that into a standalone install. So if you don't have installed Visual Studio, but you still want to get the ability to work and connect with TFS through Office, you can actually now install the standalone Office integration tools. So this will create the add-in for you for Excel, Project, PowerPoint, etc. So you still can work with bulk management of work items in Excel. You can work with other pieces of add-in, so PowerPoint and doing the storyboards, etc. So those are still there. The capability has not been removed, but the Office integration standalone is a much faster install, and you don't have the heavy weight of the Visual Studio UI and IDE with Team Explorer.
Okay. The last question that we had queued up here was related to enabling TFS 2015 work features.
Okay. So most of the changes that were made to the work management features is where Dave talked about the Kanban board, the backlogs, the other dashboards and whatnot. Those are pretty much managed for you during the upgrade. So if you're using standard out-of-the-box process templates, the upgrade should take care of most of those changes for you. But some of those features for existing projects that you already have, you'll have to go into the administration tools area and do a upgrade to existing team projects, or run the feature upgrade wizard. And this will tell you what features have been enabled and which have not been enabled, and which ones are available for upgrade. So it's a one-click to run the wizard. It will go through and update the process template for existing projects. So that when you do the upgrade to 2015, there's no guarantee that your existing projects are going to get all the features enabled. So you will want to check on your existing projects to make sure that upgrade wizard's been run to enable those features. If you have a customized process template and the upgrade wizard was not able to upgrade all those features, this is where you're going to have to actually enable those features by hand by doing a custom edit of the process template. This can be a little bit complicated depending on what the features are, and typically they've had a documentation on how to make those changes. And you can find a very detailed list of those process template changes out on MSDN. So they talk about which pieces of the process template were changed to support the new 2015 features. So the key ones that you're going to want to look at is the category XML. This is where you introduce your work item type categories, and will have an impact on how your backlog works and also your Kanban board works. You will also want to look at process configuration XML. This is where you have an impact on the states of your Kanban board. So you may need to make some changes there depending on how you've customized. And there's a big difference in 2015 between 2013 and how the Kanban board works. Because now we have the ability to, through the UI, choose where a defect shows up. So you can have it on different backlogs, and you get to, or none at all. So now you have an option to choose that. The old way you did it is you had to modify the template to put it on the backlog. If you were using Scrum, that was automatically there. If you were using Agile CMMI and you wanted to add it, that's where you had to modify the template. Again, Microsoft made significant changes to how that works to improve usability and extend the capabilities of the backlog. The third place that you're going to want to change is workitems.xml. So this is what's included in your template. So if you had an older template, say from 2012, and you made changes and customizations to it, it may not show, or you may need to add additional work items into what is available in your template. So this is a listing of all the work items that your template supports. And then finally, the actual work item templates themselves. So we now have new work item types. Epic is a new one. Feature was old, but now it's included as a standalone work item. Bug, user story, task, requirement, and product backlog item. Those all had changes made to them. So if you did customizations to those and the wizard doesn't work, those are the key areas that you want to look at to support making the changes and enabling the features. The primary two that you'll work with are going to be category and process configuration. Okay, so that wraps it up, I think, for the questions. So I'd like to open it up for the next 5 minutes or so to any of the questions that you may have around the upgrade process.
There is one question that came in the chat that we can clarify. Marcus, I think we answered most of your questions on the build. One piece of it, though, you said, do tags still work? The answer to that is no and yes. There are no longer tags on the build agents, but now there's a set of features in there called demands and capabilities. And the way it works is within a build definition, it will naturally have certain demands. For example, does it require Visual Studio on the build agent to run? And then on the agent lists off what are its capabilities. So when TFS goes to find an agent for a particular build, it looks at those demands and then finds an agent that has those capabilities and matches those up, and that's how it determines where to run that build. Now, as a user, I can go to the agent and essentially create additional system environment variables that turn into capabilities. And then on my build definition, I can specify demands to match those capabilities. And by doing that, you're effectively doing the same thing that the tags were doing in the previous build system. New question came in from Jason. We use SharePoint for TFS 2012. Will the upgrade take care of that server? With the SharePoint integration, it won't upgrade SharePoint itself. What you will have to do, I'm assuming that's on a separate server from your application tier server. You will have to I believe you will have to upgrade the TFS that's running on the SharePoint server and go into the TFS admin console and configure the SharePoint integration. And then on your application tier server, once the upgrade is complete, just have to make sure it's pointing to that same SharePoint server and perhaps do what's called a repair connection. It's just a link there in the TFS admin console, and then that should reconnect your SharePoint and TFS server.
Jason, just real quick too, the compatibility there is TFS 2015 supports SharePoint 2010 and later. So if you're on 2012, you may have SharePoint Services 3.0 or Server 2007. If that's the case, you must upgrade SharePoint individually.
Next question here from Diego. With TFS 2015, will Microsoft Test Manager have the ability to add requirements from TFS from other items that are not necessarily user stories? For the requirements-based test suites, it depends on your process template. If it was a Scrum process template, your requirements-based suites are going to be associated to product backlog items. If it was Agile, it'll be user stories. If it's CMMI, it'll be just a requirement work item type. Couple of comments there. No, I'm not aware, so I'm not sure if you're asking, can I associate a test case directly to, let's say, an issue or an impediment via a test suite? No, you cannot. Not that I'm aware of. If you are using TFS for managing bugs and everything, and if you're creating bugs, when you're creating, when you're running your tests, the bugs will naturally get associated to your test cases. A couple of other comments. It's no longer just MTM. With really since TFS 2012, there's been quite an evolution inside of Team Web Access itself regarding how much you can do with test suites and test cases, and even running the tests from the browser. You don't get the rich data diagnostic gathering that you do with MTM, but you can still step through all of your test case steps and mark off which ones have passed, and if you hit a problem right there, you can create a bug, and everything will be linked together. Yeah, that opens it up to a lot more people on your team, since everybody can access the web. The other thing that I will say is, with any work item, you can essentially create a link between any two work items. If you go to the links tab on a work item, you can say, hey, I want to create a new link. Here's another item. Here's an issue or whatever that I want to link this to. So using that mechanism, you can link test cases directly to issues or other work item types, or if you have custom work item types. One other thought there. Now, this is something you'd have to try out. Inside of the process configuration inside the process configuration.xml and the categories.xml, you can actually add other work item types to the requirement category. Now, if you do that, I don't know, do you know, David, if you have multiple work item types in the requirement category, can you then create requirements-based suites for those other types and essentially directly?
Yes, you can. I've done that for several customers before.
Okay. So I guess that's the better answer for that question. Okay, those are all the questions we have in the queue at the moment. Does anybody have any other questions, or need anything we've discussed clarified a little better? Okay. Stephanie, do you want to kind of wrap us up here? I personally want to thank everybody for their time and for their questions and everything. Hope everybody has a lot of success in moving to TFS 2015.
Yeah, I'll just quickly go over some promotions we have. So thank you, Dave and David, for that. The first one is if you book your TFS upgrade with us by December 31st, InCycle will donate $500 towards the charity of your choice. So this is a great opportunity to take advantage of. There's still about a little over 10 days for this. And if you would like to take advantage of this, you can contact us at the info@ you see on the screen or the 800 number below. The other program I wanted to talk about is the Microsoft program that was recently introduced. So this exciting new program revolves around enterprise agility, DevOps, Azure, and Visual Studio. So depending on the specifics of your project, you may qualify for up to 8 days of professional consulting, and this is at no cost to you. So to submit your project for qualification, you can contact us again at the email and 800 number you see on the screen, and we will expedite this process for you. So that is all. If you do have any questions, you can contact me personally at stephanie.long@incyclesoftware.com. Okay, so I guess there's no other questions, and that wraps it up.
Thank you, everyone, for spending your time with us today, and happy holidays, everyone.
Yep. Thank you.